Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lane Russell, and welcome to Midnight. The following is an editorial piece and does not necessarily represent the views of whatever media you're viewing me on. The President's remarks on the 17th of April most powerfully convey his displeasure with the sound defeat of various proposed pieces of legislation aimed at compromising the Second Amendment. As a private citizen, I can sympathize with the frustration the President must feel, as the effort and time poured into this project comes to nothing. I cannot fail to be pleased at the outcome, however, because it was the correct outcome. More people made the right decision than made the wrong one. The President declared the 17th of April to be a shameful day. With all due respect to the President's office, he could not have been more wrong had he deliberately tried to be as wrong as humanly possible. The 17th of April was a proud day, a day that short-sighted, ineffective, and dangerous legislation was categorically rejected by 45 men chosen for that very job. Some did so out of loyalty to the Constitution, others did so only to keep their offices in the next election. I say close enough. The President praised the proposed legislation as common sense. There was nothing of the kind. He said that a minority blocked legislation through the distortion of the rules, but in reality, rule distorting is more of a Democratic Party shtick than otherwise. Courageous congressmen in the minority tried to block the legislation. Obama's bootlickers forced the vote and lost. End of story. To reference Star Wars, he made a fair move. Screaming about it won't help you. The President said that 90% of Americans support background checks and the weapons ban. That was a lie. He was using numbers from 1994. Public opinion has shifted considerably since then. He said that people think background checks are already the law. That's because they are. There is no gun show loophole. Gun shows use the same background checks as any other brick-and-mortar establishment. We the people defeated this legislation because it was unnecessary, unwieldy, ineffective, and unconstitutional. It would have done nothing to hinder or deter criminals from obtaining guns, because they already do so illegally. It would, however, have unnecessarily increased the difficulty for law-abiding citizens to exercise their constitutional rights to own, carry, and use firearms for self-defense. Back in 1870, with the adoption of the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments, Black Americans finally had a statute written on paper recognizing and guaranteeing them their rights, their freedom, their citizenship, and their right to vote. A constitutional right. The Democrats then began employing poll taxes and literacy tests. These at the time were touted as reasonable and common sense. The poll taxes being for the upkeep of the polling places, and literacy tests were ostensibly for ensuring that the voter knew and understood what he was voting on. But they applied only to black voters, and their real purpose was obvious: to make the legitimate exercise of their constitutional rights so onerous, so expensive, and so troublesome they would not bother to exercise them. As it was then, so it is now. The Democrats wanted black Americans silenced back then, and now they don't want citizens owning weapons in freedom and safety. But now, as then, favored classes can own, buy, and trade guns without bother, such as Mark Kelly, whose wife's tragedy the President so shamelessly exploited recently. Or if you're part of the Mexican cartel, Obama's Justice Department might fall all over itself to arm and equip you with fully automatic weapons, and this from a man who cannot even bring himself to trust the National Guardsmen charged with keeping him safe at his own inauguration with live ammunition. Ladies and gentlemen, they can continue to push their background checks and wellness checks and their reasonable common sense legislation. But I know history, and this is just another Democratic poll tax, another Democrat-sponsored literacy test. Seem to have lost my place. I know the Constitution better than they seem to. And throughout constitutional history, one thing rings true. The Democrats are now, and have always been, the party of slavery. banning so-called assault rifles, handguns, magazines holding so many bullets, all to make our rights too burdensome to exercise or defend. All of these will get people killed. In fact, the pattern and trend analysis suggests that the president and his crew prefer the law-abiding be helpless before both the law and the lawless, all from Brian Terry to Christopher Stevens. The president has also claimed that this legislation outlawed a national gun registry right there in the text. With all due respect to the office of the presidency, I hope I will be forgiven if I don't take President Obama at his word, which I estimate to be worth less than 1 Italian lira. President Obama has charged that the NRA has willfully lied about the legislation, but lying seems to be more the president's methodology than otherwise. When he first took office, I encouraged those of his detractors that I knew to give him a chance to prove himself. I gave the president the benefit of the doubt. I can now see that I was wrong, I admit it. The administration has spread falsehoods and deceits and abetted by the media. When called upon it, the Obama administration doesn't Clinton out by denying until it's no longer a viable option. They just ignore it all and continue as though they haven't been called to account. It's really quite a brilliant strategy. Here is the problem. I have said nothing new. They know that gun control kills innocent people. They know that disarming the public leaves innocents helpless. And they know that I know they're lying when they say they honor the Second Amendment, because they don't. They lie repeatedly, and when shown that they are lying, they maintain their position with a pertinacity unmatched by any playground fifth grader debating with his fellows to discover whose mother is the fattest. In other words, and with all due respect, again, to the office of the president, sir, you lie. Representative Joe Wilson was shamed for speaking out first what is known to be true. If President Obama said that the sky was blue, I would have to go outside to confirm it. I hear, nobody wants your guns. Well, legislation is crafted for public disarmament. They call it affordable health care, and it will bankrupt the country, prospective patients and healthcare providers, and furthermore, no one can seem to figure it out. They mock Sarah Palin's death panels, even as they are currently being set up. Once again, with respect to your office, Mr. President, you have no right to be grouchy. You have no right to complain. You have no right to get up in front of the cameras, propped up by grieving parents, and in front of God, Allah, and everyone, throw a 100-meter freestyle whimpering hissy fit just because a few senators did not buy into your pet legislation. Your insane and dangerous gun bills were not defeated by a minority, because that is not the way the voting works. Furthermore, the senators who voted correctly were not intimidated by the gun lobby that you so fear. They heeded the voice of the American people, the voice of the 53%, and they did their jobs. They did what we pay them to do. The President took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, whatever his beliefs are personally. Whether he agrees with it or not, he is bound by honor and by his oath to support and defend it. That means you do what it says, and you stop screwing around with it. President Obama needs to try to quit thinking up cute little ways to get around legislation he doesn't like, and just do what is in the Constitution. It was written to shackle the government, not the people. I'm Lane Russell, and this has been Midnight.